Welcome to Happy Writing, your podcast home for taking positive steps forward with your author business. I'm your host and happy writer-in-chief, Dion Abulela. For joining us today, you can get the first 3 months of membership to the Happy Writing Author Lounge for only $5 a month. Simply use the code HAPPYPODCAST and join us over in the Author Lounge. We are so excited today to welcome you to our inaugural episode where we will be featuring author Jenny Lewis. If you're ready to go, we are ready to go. Today's episode is sponsored by author Meg Geary. Meg is the author of Write a Novel in 30 Days, the interactive writer's guide to finishing your novel in 30 days. Meg's going to walk you through outlining a novel and why you should consider adding some structure to your process before you begin writing. You can find Meg's novel at your favorite bookseller, including Amazon, and the link will be available in the podcast description for this very show. All right, welcome to the Happy Writing Podcast, and today we are so excited to be joined by Jenny Lewis. Jenny is not only the author of a fantasy series, but she is also the founder of an amazing organization called Write Into the Woods. And we're going to have just a great time with Jenny today, and we're so excited to have her. How are you today, Jenny?
I'm really good, thanks. How are you?
I'm excellent. Definitely excited to talk to you.
Yeah.
I kind of stalked you a little bit, and I have so many questions. Let's just get to know you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what your inspiration is for writing, why you write, and what you love about being an author.
Okay. Well, I've been writing my whole life. I started off when I was really young. My mum would make up stories for me when I was a baby, and it kind of just went from there, really. So she would make up stories for me, and then when I was a bit older, we'd make up stories together, and she would write them down, and we'd make a little book, and I'd draw all over it, until I got to the point where I could write myself, and then I was off from there on, really. I was writing. I've been writing stories since I learned how to write. And I kind of discovered fantasy when I was a teenager. I suffered my first proper bout of writer's block when I was a teenager. I was a bit of a horse nut when I was a kid. So I wrote a lot of stories about wanting to have a horse and just horses in general. And then I hit my early teens and it was all about vampires, which was great because it was about the same time Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out. So it all worked out that way. And then my late teens, I just kind of got bored of vampires and I didn't know what to write and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I had months of just staring at blank documents and not knowing what to do with myself. And it was good because I used that time it was before Google that time, but I used that time to kind of look up articles on the internet about how to write and the techniques and things. So I learned a lot, but I wasn't actually doing any writing. And that was around the time the first Lord of the Rings film came out, The Fellowship of the Ring. And when I go and see a movie, my brain is always very chatty. and I think that film is the first time my brain has ever gone silent on me. It's that scene where Gandalf lights up his staff and in the Mines of Moria, and it made my brain speechless, that whole scene. And that's the first time that's ever happened. And when I came home from that, I just started writing again. It completely unblocked me, and I had to go at epic fantasy and just didn't get on with it very well. But the whole genre of fantasy kind of stuck. So I suppose I was writing fantasy before because I was writing about vampires, but it kind of took me into the realms of other different types of subgenres. And yeah, I've been writing fantasy since then, kind of exploring all the different subgenres. And I started writing my first published book. It took me 7 years to write that one, but that's more about dragons than anything else. And yeah, I've kind of been on a roll since then. I can't remember what your other questions were.
I think that hit all of them.
Oh, okay,
Which is great. I'm excited about a few things one, we're very close in age because Buffy was also during my teenage years. So I understand not only that, but also trying to figure out information before the Google age.
Yes. I don't actually remember how we did it.
I don't. I remember GeoCities and
Yes. Cities. Wow.
yeah, that's really about it.
Yeah.
But the
I
other
don't remember how we used to look stuff up.
yeah, and even that was back when Yahoo first came out. So even before Yahoo, what did we do? I have no idea. But the other thing is, I have so much respect for fantasy authors because for you to sit down and not only just write a book, but have to create a whole new world and a whole new political system, possibly even a race, possibly even a religion, most of the time languages, it's just amazing. So kudos to you for even attempting to tackle that because I'm not brave enough. So I love that you said you got started writing by sitting down with your mom, kind of doing these little doodle books. But what keeps you writing? What's your inspiration to continue?
I think it's actually just a need to write. It's something in me. When I was at university, my first year at university, when I was a fresher, obviously it was really, really a busy time, and I didn't have a lot of time to write because I was too busy meeting people and getting on my course, and I stopped writing. I can't remember how long for, but it was probably a couple of months. And I actually got to a point where it started to physically take its toll on me. And I remember sitting in a lecture, really boring lecture, and just kind of my actual hand started shaking because I just needed to be writing. And I kind of went back to my room after that and just kind of wrote a whole story. So yeah, I have a physical need to write, it turns out, where if I don't write for so long, it does actually have an effect on me. So that's motivation in itself. Yeah, just the kind of the need to get the stories out of me and the need to do that. I do find that if I don't write for a while, I start to talk to myself quite a lot. So in order, yeah. So yeah, in order to stay sane, you need to write.
Oh, that's amazing. I love and that's really such a great answer to me about it makes me kind of think of those times where I'm really jittery. Is it because I'm not letting a story come out? And so I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to that moving forward.
It sounds really strange, but yeah, it's true. Yeah.
I think we're going to have a lot of authors who connect with that, and you may actually create a light bulb moment for a lot of authors. Can you tell me about an incident or an instance, I should say, in your career where you maybe wanted to give up, or in the process of publishing where a challenge presented itself and you weren't sure what to do, but you made it through and you overcame, and maybe a little bit about how this impacted the path of your career?
Oh yeah, there's loads of times when that's happened. I mean, it's the little times like when you just hit an editing block. I hate editing. When you hit an editing block and you say, oh, why am I doing this? This is just so painful. But I think the thing that really changed my writing path, as you say, was when I decided to self-publish. I'd finished my first novel. I'd got it to a point where I thought, actually, this could be published, and I'm ready for the world to see this. Wasn't quite ready, but I thought it was ready to kind of send out to agents. And I started researching all of that, how to get an agent, how to get it published. I started writing the synopsis, which is like a whole other level of hell. And I started writing the query letter, which is equally as painful. And the more I researched it, the more I realized just how much time it would take to publish it down the traditional route if that was something that even actually happened. If I was lucky enough to find an agent, it would take so long. And then all the steps you have to go through before that. And then if they manage to find a publisher, and then even when you found a publisher, it can take a year. It does take a year from signing the contract to actually getting the book out. And I just thought, if I, put my all into it now, I could get it published within 6 months. And I pride myself on doing a really good job of it. I put a lot of work into making sure it's done as professionally as possible, but I just thought I could do it so quickly and have control over it. I could have say over the title and the cover and everything else. And the idea of that really excited me. And it was almost like a little challenge to myself. And I did it. And within 6 months, my first book, Matter of Time, was published and out. And it's so much fun, self-publishing. And it gives you a real sense of pride doing it to a really high quality and a really high level. And so, yeah, that stumbling block of trying to write a query and a synopsis and basically being incredibly impatient, which is what I am, did change my whole trajectory, because before then I was just going to keep going the traditional route. And I'd considered self-publishing before, but not that seriously. But now the idea of self-publishing and building a business out of it is something that gives me a real thrill.
Great.
I still want to go down the traditional route at some point just to see if I can. But yeah, that was a big moment for me.
Yeah. What your fantasy series, do you publish under a pen name, or do you?
Yeah, I do. My pen name is J.E. Nice. Nice is my maiden name. So it's kind of always been me. So even when I got married and changed my name, I decided to keep writing under my maiden name.
I know some of our readers might want to stalk you or find your book. So.
J.E. Nice, N-I-C-E, for all the people who want to stalk me.
Don't stalk too hard. Just stalk.
No.
So Right Into the Woods seems so amazing, because you told me that you support authors and you teach them fiction writing with an emphasis on confidence.
Yes.
And I love this. And I have to know how you developed this idea.
Yeah, it's very similar to happy writing, actually. It's just kind of all staying positive about it all. And yeah, it came about because over the years, when I've told people what I do and that I write fantasy and that I write books, I always get asked questions. It's always the same questions. It's always basically, how do you do that? How do you create a plot? How do you create a structure? How do you create characters? How do you get started? And I mean, there are technical answers to all those questions, but underneath, every time I got asked, I could just tell that they were entirely capable of doing these things. They were very, very capable of writing a story, but something was holding them back. And in each time, I just think it was their confidence holding them back. I think everyone is capable of writing fiction. Everyone is capable of writing stories or writing whatever they want to write. Mm-hmm. And I think a lack of confidence can hold so many people back. And it needn't be the case, because it isn't actually as scary or as overwhelming as people think it is. So that's kind of what the ethos behind Right Into the Woods is about. It shows the technical side of things as well. But it's about building up your confidence to do that thing that's scaring you, whether that is starting to write, or whether that's that little part of writing a story that scares you, like creating a character, something that kind of unsticks you a bit, or whether it's submitting stories to publications or to agents or self-publishing. Just building up your confidence to do that, knowing that you can do that.
That's amazing. How long have you been in business with Right Into the Woods?
Right Into the Woods is quite new. It started off as just my author blog. And then the more people kept asking me questions, the more I thought I should make this into a bit more of a thing and separate it out a bit. So it's new in the sense that I've only started to do it seriously beginning of this year. So if you do go on to Right Into the Woods, you won't find a whole lot of content yet, but there is a lot coming. So it's all planned out, and it's all in the process of coming. But the idea has been in my head for quite a few years. So yeah, it's been kind of a long time in the making.
How did you get the name Right Into the Woods? Because for those who are listening, we'll put the links in the podcast description, but it's WRITE Into the Woods. Some people might be thinking we're saying right, like WRIGHT. My maiden name is Wright, so I almost spelled out my maiden name. But how did you get this idea? Because to me, it just brought out this sense of tranquility and getting back to nature. And it brought a sense of peace to me, just even hearing the name. Is that kind of what you were going for?
Oh, I'm glad it gave you that. I don't think that's it is kind of what I was going for. It's a very personal name for it, I think, because, as I say, it started off as just my author blog, so it is quite a personal thing. And there's a whole mixture of things in there. I mean, I need to be around trees, just generally in life, probably for the same reason that, it evokes a kind of a tranquil thing in you. That's what being around trees is for me. When I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, I go for a walk in the woods. And it kind of just makes everything better. So that's a part of it. And the other part is a bit more geeky. And, I'm a big fan of the TV show Firefly, which a lot of people might not have heard of. Have you heard of Firefly?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, good. And there's a bit where Mal, the captain, says to, I think it's Anara, he says that they're lost in the woods. And every time I see that, it strikes a note with me about being lost in the woods. And I kind of feel that way a lot about life. And that's why I kind of mix that in with how peaceful I feel when I am in woods, when I am walking through the woods. And just wanting to mix in the whole thing. I mean, I kind of feel woodlands often kind of feature a lot in some of my stories as well, because I get a lot of ideas when I'm walking through the woods. And I think being a fantasy writer, a lot of the kind of dark fantasy and paranormal fantasy kind of stuff always takes me back to forests and woodland and things like that.
Cool.
So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of things, but I'm glad it brings out a kind of a tranquil, peaceful.
This actually wasn't even a question I planned on asking. It's not on my list, but I just had to ask real quick. The question I'm supposed to be asking you next relates to your kind of emphasis on confidence. And I'm curious what you think are common threads that can damage a writer's confidence, or what have you noticed authors tend to encourage within themselves that damage their confidence as an author?
I think the main thing, and I think this because I've seen it in people and I've experienced it myself, is the whole idea of because when you write a story, it's like you've put your whole being into it, you've put your heart into it, and then putting that out into the world is terrifying, because you don't know how people are going to react to it. And it's always scary to think that someone's not going to like it, that you might get a bad review, that you will get rejected. And I think that's the main stumbling block for a lot of writers, and people who are just starting off. Even just writing something that then, like writing a first draft that no one's necessarily going to see, is scary, because you're putting yourself out there, even if it's just onto a document on a screen or onto a notepad or however you choose to write. And I think that it's just that's all part of being a writer, is overcoming that first hurdle of kind of getting the words written and being brave enough to put yourself out there. And it is scary, and not everyone has to write and put themselves out there. You can just write for yourself, of course.
I love that point.
Yeah.
To write for yourself.
Definitely. Because, sometimes you just want to get a story out and entertain yourself. But if you do want to kind of put your writing out there, then I think you just need to embrace the negativity, as it were. If you're gonna get rejected, every writer gets rejected, and it's not a bad thing. It means that you're brave, and that you're a writer, and that you're putting stuff out there, and that you're doing it. And I think every rejection needs to be celebrated for that reason. And if you've got a bad review, then that just means that someone read your book. I think it's changing your focus on it.
Rejections and bad reviews don't mean necessarily that you're a bad writer. It just means that particular person, you didn't resonate, and that's okay.
Exactly. And I think that's something that every writer needs to remember, is that writing is reading and writing are completely subjective. You're going to have people who love what you write. You're going to have people who don't get it. And it's annoying when the people who don't get it then leave a review. But, that's life. And I think you do have to kind of focus on the positive from it. Oh, hey, they bought my book. or hey, they read it, enough to comment on it. They felt that passionate that they had to leave a review.
Exactly. I always refer to J.K. Rowling. Someone tweeted to her I'm so upset with you over this opinion. I'm going to burn your book. And she was like, it's okay. You've already paid for it.
Yeah, I loved that.
When I have authors that are struggling with a bad review, I say, listen, they read your book, and something they say in that review may be what someone else is looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's horribly bad grammar and they're saying that you need to hire 10 editors.
Yeah. But then that's quite helpful, because you think, oh, I've seen some reviews from self-published writers. It's like, oh, there's just so many typos in it. You think, oh, good. Well, thank you for letting me know. And you can go back and you can give it another proofread and you can catch all those typos.
Exactly. What do you think are some quick confidence boosters that authors can do either daily or maybe even just when they're feeling down to kick them back up?
Well, the one thing that I've always done when I'm feeling like my writing is rubbish, I think there are a couple of ways of doing it. It depends how you're feeling and what works for you, of course. But kind of researching techniques on writing always helps me kind of get in the mood about writing. Reading about how to build a business or how to create that character, something that will motivate you. Obviously, if you don't want to build a business out of your writing, not necessarily read up on that, but kind of where you want to be, if you read up on that, it will help to motivate you to get going and to write more on that. But I think a lot of the times, if you're feeling a bit stuck, it can be really helpful just to stop writing and take a step back and just take a break from it. And doing something you really love that inspires you, and just kind of forget about the writing. And I find that always helps to kind of unblock me and unstick me and build my confidence up again, because I'll get excited. I'll get an idea and I'll get really excited about it, and I'll kind of forget what was dragging me down or any negative thoughts I had, because I'll just be so excited about this idea and I'll have to get it down.
I love that. I don't even have anything to say to that. You have my brain thinking, and I'm processing a piece I was stuck on today, and I'm like, I really should have gone for that walk after all.
Yeah, going for a walk, it can really, really help. I find, because I've gotten a dog recently, I think taking the dog for a walk is really helpful. It kind of really helps to figure out plot points and character problems and things. But I mean, when I'm properly stuck, I like to watch favorite TV shows or a film or something, and that can just kind of stir up some ideas and some inspiration as well. And actually, even if either like new ideas or just help you kind of get through a plot problem or something, because it can just kind of make you look at things from a different angle.
Absolutely. Jenny, I have to know, what is your favorite book?
I have loads of favorite books. I could give you a list. My absolute favorite book, for purely sentimental reasons, is a novella by Stephen King called The Body, which I actually discovered, the film of which is Stand By Me, which I discovered when I was 12 years old, and completely fell in love with. And that film got me through my teenage years and all the teenage angst. And then I discovered the book when I was about 18, finally tracked it down. So that's the book that I've got that's completely worn out and pages nearly falling out of, because I've read it so many times. But my other favorite books I absolutely love, and I recommend to people whenever I see them, are kind of a whole mixture of things. They're all kind of the fantasy, sci-fi related. But they're a whole mixture of things. So I love Vicious by V.E. Schwab. She's a young adult writer, mainly. People have probably heard of her, Victoria Schwab. And Vicious is her first adult book, I think. So I hadn't heard of her until I found Vicious and completely fell head over heels in love with it. And I also love there's a Ketty J series by Chris Wooding, which is, I always struggle with trying to figure out what subgenre my books fit into. And I kind of struggle with these books as well. They're described as steampunk fantasy, but they're not really steampunk. I don't really know what they are, but they're brilliant. And they've got a very Firefly feel about them, which I think is why I love them so much, just very actiony.
Nice.
Yeah, and just there's a couple of others. I mean, like the Rivers of London series by Ben Aronovich, which is completely different. Again, that's an urban fantasy series with kind of wizards and magic based in London. And then there's Bite by K.S. Merbeth, who, Bite is kind of Mad Max ish and kind of post-apocalyptic, completely different again. And just doesn't stop. It's just action from page one and just had me gripped the whole way through. So yeah, I have loads of favorite books. Those are the ones I always kind of push on people.
Thank you for blowing up my TBR list.
Sorry.
I have to tell you that I'm glad that you brought up V.E. Schwab, because she is so elegant with her online presence and the way she deals with people. And I don't know if you saw last summer, or it could have been the summer before, there was a conflict over another author, and a fan tried to drag her into it as an example of how to do something. And she was so polite in saying, listen, I don't want to be used to drag another author. If you don't agree with them, I respect you, but I also respect all the fellow authors. And I immediately went out and bought her book that day, because I bought everything I could find by her, because I thought that was such a beautiful response to just insist on this respect. And so
I think I missed all of that, but yeah, she is fantastic with how she deals with all of those types of things. And she seems to have them come up quite a lot, those kind of moments, I think, because she's got such a big following.
Yeah.
She always handles it beautifully. Much like J.K. Rowling does.
Yeah. Although I think J.K. Rowling is the only author who can get away with as much sass as she does. Yeah. But this has been such a fun interview. I could talk to you all day. And I really encourage any of our followers to check out Right Into the Woods. We'll leave the links in the promotional block for this podcast. But to close out here, Jenny, I'm curious if you have a favorite inspirational quote that might connect with our authors.
I don't necessarily have any particularly favorite inspirational quotes. I tend to like a lot of song lyrics that I'll just kind of play over and over again to kind of inspire me and boost me. But the one quote that has been really resonating with me, especially at the moment, I'm writing a first draft of my new novel at the moment, and I was supposed to have finished it 2 months ago. And I'm still working on it. So that quote by Douglas Adams, which is, I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by.
Yes.
That's the one that sums me up, really.
I like it. I love your personality, and I love your energy, and just how authentic you are in not being afraid to like what you like and encourage others to like what they like. I feel that so often in the writing world, authors feel like they have to lose themselves. And I think through this interview, they'll see that they can absolutely be themselves and love what they love without embarrassment.
Definitely. They should be themselves, because that's how you find your perfect reader, is by being yourself and finding people who resonate with you.
Wonderful. Well, I really want to thank you so much for giving me your time today. And I'm so glad that I got to meet you. And I hope that everybody checks out not only your titles, but looks a little bit into Right Into the Woods and sees if you are the person to help them, which hopefully after this, they will.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been great fun.
All right, Jenny, have a great day.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
We want to thank you for joining us today for the Happy Writing Podcast. And as always, don't forget to head over to happywriting.co and take advantage of that $5 deal just for listening to our podcast. You can join the Author Lounge for $5 for your first 3 months using the code Happy Podcast. If you want to sponsor a future episode, you can also find that information under happywriting.co/podcast. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next author interview.